What is happening, people? It's your boy Delboy here, and I know a lot of you are shocked by that intro because you guys didn't think INDYTAKERS would be back, but we are doing maybe a one-time special. It's a very, very hellacious week. It's a very, very important week, not just for like wrestling fans in general, but British wrestling fans. And who better to sit down with? I've got Mr. Andy Quildan in the building, and everybody make some noise for him. How are you, Andy?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, just getting ready for the biggest show in RevPro history. So just non-stop, go every day. But it's reasons like this why we love professional wrestling. So you got to take it with a smile and take everything in your stride.
100%. How's this week been for you in terms of like just prepping for the show, like logistics, mentally preparing yourself? Like, how's things been?
I mean, it's been quite crazy. So we had this was the first week off I think we've had since the start of June. This past weekend just gone. We've been going every single week hard, and we had this weekend off to kind of with the idea of preparing and everything. But then obviously I got swept up in the Premier League and the start of the new season, and didn't perhaps make the best use of my weekend. So that's led us to this week, and yeah, and we'll call it organized chaos. But like I say, it's you kind of learn to deal with these situations and really try just to take it in your stride as much as possible. It's tough, but we've been in situations like this before, and you just know that if you just keep persevering, keep pushing through, drown out the noise, so to speak, then by the time you get to the end goal, it's all going to be worth it. And I just hope that this time I'm going to be able to enjoy it a little bit more than the other big shows that we've run over our history, because I feel like I'm a little bit more prepared, even though you've got that fear of the unknown at the same time.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. Even before we continue on with wrestling stuff, I see your jersey. Arsenal finally ended their 22-year title drought. They won the title. They won the champions the same year, the 14th anniversary. Is that some sort of kind of sign? Is it a fun coincidence? Like, how do you find that?
It's a good omen, isn't it? Absolutely a good omen. Yeah, it's good. It's given me, look, I think we put. It's nice to have a bit of escapism, right? For a lot of people, when I was younger, wrestling used to be my escapism. When I got into wrestling, inside the business, I had to find escapism somewhere else. So I kind of went to football. I always had two loves, football and wrestling, but football provides that bit of escapism where you can forget about all the trials and tribulations of the real world. And it's not happening. And then you just hope your team wins, because then, that makes it all worthwhile. So yeah, it's been a great escape, but also it's a great form of entertainment amongst the boys backstage as well. Like, RevPro is very much an Arsenal territory, but we do have a few enemy fans in our ranks as well. So it's always fun to kind of get involved in a bit of a football banter. But like I say, honestly, it is a nice way to forget about everything else which is going on, and forget about the world's troubles for a little while. It's just a bit of fun.
Yeah, 100%. 14 years of RevPro. When you started this company, did you ever genuinely imagine you'd be sitting there preparing for RevPro 40th anniversary show, and not just the 40th anniversary show, a Wembley show?
You know what? I really didn't, because I didn't ever imagine me being this old. I'm old now, and I'm old and I'm tired. And, I didn't expect to. I don't know. I just couldn't imagine something like this. I guess you always dream. So when you don't start something to, get halfway with it. You don't start something with the intention of being, this is going to be a half-assed project. You always want to push it as far as you can. But I feel like I've always had no real expectation of where we're going, apart from knowing that I want us to go forward. And I think that's what we've done. That's been the mindset throughout, just consistently pressing, consistently moving forward, and dealing with every trial and tribulation which is in our way, and just making stuff happen. We always find a way, when people say we can't, we find a way to make it possible. can't and won't. We change with can and will, you know, and we do whatever we can to make things happen. It's very much a one day at a time thing. If you say to me, where are we going to be in a year's time, in 2 years' time, in 10 years' time, I've genuinely got no idea, apart from the fact all I know is that we will be in a better position than we're in today. And that's something which has been consistent throughout that 14-year history. And you can look back and you can judge it by any metric you want. And you can see that we are now in a much better position than we were last year, the year before that, etc., etc. There's been a natural progression throughout the course of our 14 years. Sometimes you wish it'd go that little bit faster. Right now, I genuinely feel we've got such a talented roster, and I just feel we're just knocking on the door of something huge. The closer you get to something, the more it hurts, the harder it becomes, the more you feel, I guess. But I genuinely think we're close to something very, very special, even though I believe on a week-to-week basis, we're creating special things anyway. But, you know, I just want to be able to take it to its next level and give all the guys and girls on our roster the platform that they deserve to be presented on.
100%. Why Wembley now? You know, we've over the years, you know, we look at York Hall, which is basically the spiritual home of RevPro. You guys have done Copperbox a few years. You guys have done Crystal Palace a few shows as well. What was the decision that made you say, you know what, Wembley? Let's do Wembley.
So I've said, like, we always wanted to do Wembley when AEW first did Wembley Stadium. You know, we had decisions to make, and we were like thinking, do we do shows at York Hall? Do we maybe go to the bigger Crystal Palace? Do we go to Wembley? Do we try the Copperbox? And we actually did try Wembley that first year, but it wasn't available, and we wound up going to the Copperbox, with whom we had a previous relationship with because of our organization of the New Japan Royal Quest show in 2019. So that was the next best thing. Obviously, the mindset was always, we want to be on the doorstep of Wembley Stadium. We want to be right amongst it, you know, for All-In weekend. So I think it became kind of natural, I think, that we went back to Copperbox, and the following year, last year, we actually wanted to go to Copperbox again last year, which I think would have been quite good for us, because Copperbox, you know, from a geographical standpoint, is actually right next to the O2, where obviously AEW ran their Forbidden Door show. But they weren't available, and then we had to make the decision of what to do, which is why we kind of went for 2 nights at Crystal Palace in order to kind of enable us to deliver shows the size of what people expect for an anniversary weekend or an anniversary show. So we did 2 shows in one venue. The economics just worked out better that way. But now we're kind of in the situation whereby this year, it was like we went back to Copperbox. A lot of stuff has changed in Copperbox. And then we inquired with Wembley, and they were like, oh, we've got something penciled in. You can challenge it. But obviously, the issues with a challenge is you have to pay the money. Like, you have to pay a lot of money up front, which obviously you get back if you lose a challenge. And if you don't, if you win the challenge, then obviously it just goes towards the show. So, like, it's basically committing a huge chunk of money up front to make it happen. And we've just got belief and confidence in what we're doing, and we just did it. And you know, obviously, being a small business, it meant, you know, a couple of difficult months, but we made it happen, as we always do make it happen. And now we're here, and I'm so glad we made this decision, because again, it is crazy. Look, I feel our goal is to beat our attendance record from the Copperbox the first year we ran the Copperbox, which was 4,072 people. We are very much on course to do that. And I'm quietly confident that we will do that. We want to stretch as far as we can, but that's always been the goal. It's never been about, you know, more than that. It's never been, again, like I say, we tried to make modest steps forward. We tried to have a bit of self-awareness, and we tried to approach everything with a common sense mentality. So, you know, look, did I think we were suddenly going to get 8,000 people? No. It would be nice, right? And I mean, it's still possible. Who knows what could happen in the next few days? But it's, you know, we've kind of got into it with a very realistic mentality. But what it has done, and even if we draw the exact same number of fans we had at the Copperbox, what it has done is it's added such a degree of legitimacy to Revolution Pro Wrestling, because Wembley just carries just such a weight with it. People know what Wembley Arena is. They don't know what the Copper Box is. Because Wembley's been steeped in pop culture, it's steeped in our history, and I just feel it's so important. It's such a statement piece, if you will, to be running Wembley Arena. And like I say, it's just so perfectly situated, and we're really hoping we're going to get that last minute, what it's designed to do, basically. Those fans that are in town, to make that last minute split decision of let's just go and have a good time, and we're hoping it's going to expose us to a new audience. And that's a part of what we have to do. We have to expose ourselves to new audiences constantly, and we have to put ourselves outside our comfort zone in order to do that. And that's what Wembley represents.
That's completely understandable. And even you mentioning obviously being a small business and whatnot, was there ever a point maybe you thought to yourself, have we bitten off more than we chew, or has it just been that straight confidence of, you know what, regardless, as long as we get to, the 4K that we're trying to get to, that's the most important thing?
So a longer form answer, without going into too much detail, is that there's been many times over the 14 years where I've been like, I think we've bitten off more than we can chew. But what it's done is it's created a resourcefulness and a resilience that have meant that we've been able to see things through. So we've been in these situations before with our backs against the wall and pushed through. And I think that's very much a mentality we had to take when undertaking Wembley Arena. I think there's a lot of things that have shocked me. Look, anytime you run big events, I think the one thing that is, we need to make clear is, obviously we are a small business. We have no sponsors. We're open to sponsors, but we have none. And we haven't outwardly pursued sponsors, because again, I do every facet of this business. So I'm kind of spinning plates, and I have to do what necessitates what we have to do operationally to ensure the business goes from one day to the next. So I don't necessarily have time, whilst, look, bigger picture, it might be great to get those sponsors in, because obviously it could help us a lot more. But the reality is we have to do the dirty work. We have to do that groundwork, and that's what we have to do. We can't spend time chasing a sponsor that might fall through at this present time. Hopefully we'll get to that stage where we're able to do this kind of stuff, right? But we've got no sponsors. We've got no TV deal. We live and die off of ticket sales. We live and die off our VOD subscriptions. That's the bottom line, right? So you go into this with a mindset of, how many tickets do I need to sell to get to this, to get to what we perceive to be a break-even level. And it's always bastard maths, because you always get, stuff added on last minute that you're not expecting. But one thing that has been happened throughout, and it's across the entire events industry, and it's happened on our regional events, our events we run in a week in, week out basis, but the cost of everything has gone up substantially. And you look at it, it's a similar price scale to what we did in the Copper Box in 2024. But that was a maths I was going into when I was thinking, this is a number we need to achieve. But then when it comes down to it, a lot of the costs have gone up so much. And I'm talking like the production costs, some of them have doubled, right? And these are the things you don't really anticipate unless you're doing this, because obviously, when you think about it realistically, our events, the cost of running events have gone up significantly, but because we were doing a smaller scale, you're not looking at it with such big numbers. But when you times what you're doing by 10, right, those small amounts of money that go up are astronomical, right? So when we started getting the quotes through and whatever, that was like almost a coming to earth moment, where it's like, wow, our bottom line is actually a lot higher than we thought it was, and that's almost like a sense of panic in that situation. But it's like, what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to sit and moan? Are you going to sit and complain? Are you going to panic? Or are you going to do something about it? So that's what we've been doing. We've just been pushing so hard to make this happen. And I think we're right now, I think, what are we, 4 days out, I think, or 5 days out. I don't know, really don't even know what day of the week it is right now, but we are absolutely sitting in a nice position, but now we need to get it to a position to make us comfortable, and to try and turn this into a profit that we can put back into the company. And what I will say as well is the numbers it will require, the fine margins are just insane, right, as well, because the numbers that it will require to go from that break even to profit are so small. Once you pass that line, right, and obviously it's a premium event, there's premium price tickets, and it can make a huge difference. But look, everything that we get out of this show will go back in to Revolution Pro Wrestling. That's what we've had to do over the years. It's just a method that has ensured that we're able to slowly but surely grow in a sustainable manner. And that's what we're going to do.
That sounds fantastic. Did want to ask, even just outside of RevPro a little bit, because me and the boys were having a conversation on the podcast maybe like a month or two ago. Do you think there's ever a landscape within British wrestling that we could potentially maybe get some sort of super show where it's not just a RevPro doing a big Wembley? It could be, let's say, for example, we have an O2 Arena and we have representatives of RevPro, representative of Progress, maybe Riot Cabaret, like just a massive show where it just celebrates British wrestling and all facets of it. Like, do you think that's ever something you'd be interested in?
I don't think so on that level. Right now, the reason I say that is because look, every single promotion within the UK operates under different circumstances, so budgets and whatever have you. Right. So I know from experience when I've tried to get other promotions involved in kind of bigger venues that we've run, that they'll look at the overhead and be like, oh my God, we're not going near that, because you've got to dare to dream. Right. And like I say, the margins are very fine. So obviously you kind of, yes, it's the outlay is so much more, but then the return is so much more as well. So it's like the scale of the economy, essentially. So I think that's what prevents it's very hard. I think that's one of the big barriers to entry. But do I think that we could have almost, and I want All In Weekend to be like this in terms of being that celebration of professional wrestling, which is why I love to see all the different events, the wrestling shows, the Q&As, the autograph signings, everything going on across that weekend. I love to see it. I'd love it to be even bigger, and I'd love everyone to kind of, get behind it even more so, and really champion everyone else which is doing events across the weekend. I think that's very important. But do I think that we could do a almost like a festival of wrestling across a weekend, in a kind of central location, where, we may use the same building and maybe a building around that building, and maybe there's a RevPro show, maybe there's a Progress show, maybe there's an Eve show, a Riot Cabaret show, all these shows, maybe an Attack show, maybe a showcase show where all the training schools send a match, so we can look at the future of wrestling, so to speak. And then maybe we have autograph signings and Q&As surrounding that. Maybe we take a hotel and do it in, maybe we do it in a venue and then we have autograph signings and stuff around the hotel, almost like your own WrestleCon type situation. I think that is something which is more realistic, because when you think about something like that, essentially, if you took one venue, which is a blank canvas, and they say to you, look, this is what it costs to hire the venue. This is the cost of it for the weekend or for 3 days. You do a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I guess, or maybe a Saturday, Sunday, Monday bank holiday. I don't know, right? But just thinking out loud here, and you say, we take this space. This is what it costs for this space. And then essentially you can then divide that time up. You get your production costs, your overall production costs, and you divide that time up. So you've got 6 shows, for example, you might divide that up by 6, right? And then you say, right, this is the cost of running your show. We're going to offer a ticket that gets everyone access to everything, and we're going to proportion the money from each ticket sale accordingly. So, for example, if you're going in, if there's an event that comes in, so maybe the evening events, maybe they're a more premium priced event, maybe the early morning events, maybe they're cheaper. But then you look at the percentage of what people pay per event, and you put make those percentages accordingly to the weekend ticket price, and everyone gets a proportion of that weekend ticket, and then they can sell their own tickets as well. right? So I think that that is something which is a lot more achievable. And is that something that could then start to open people's eyes? Is that then something that could, if the fans get behind it, if there's a groundswell of support behind it, is that something like where the following year you're like, okay, let's make it a step bigger. And the following year, let's make it a step bigger, right? Now it might be, now let's run this kind of similar thing, right? But then at the end of the weekend, let's go to a big arena with the show, with a match from everyone, right? Maybe that's the way to do it.
I'm excited, man. How can we make this happen? You've got to be excited. I feel like this needs to happen.
But, well, look, the reality to a situation of everything is people just need to put their money where their mouths are, and that's it. So
hearing this, let's put our money where our mouths are. Let's make this happen. I feel like this is an amazing idea. The Brit Rest Fest. I think this would be something that people would genuinely pay money for.
Yeah. Well, and again, look, that's the acid test of everything, isn't it? And like you want to start. And that's why I say you want to start slow with whatever you do. You want to start slow and kind of prove the concept before you then go to the next level. But again, you have to understand the nature of professional wrestling. There's so many egos involved, and there's so many people second guessing one another. Is this person trying to get a better deal than me? Is this person positioning their show in a better position than my show? And I think that that's one of the big obstacles to overcome. But look, it's not something that can't be overcome. And I think that if everyone goes into it with that positive attitude, and again, self-awareness, because that's what I say. Like I work with countless partnerships across the world of professional wrestling, and I say one of the biggest parts about being able to operate a successful partnership is self-awareness, knowing where you are in the deal, but also, and I say this, but you also have to appreciate that you bring something to the table as well. So you can't go there, you can't go into a relationship, because look at myself, I'm the B side in most of our partnerships, right? So when I'm working with AEW without a doubt are the A side, New Japan, CMLL, etc. These are huge global corporations. But I'm also under no illusions that I bring some value to the deal as well. So, you have to have that self-awareness on both sides. And you have to almost be able to check your ego at the door in order to make these things work. And again, this may be something that is very far in the future, because this may be something where, look, when I say proof of concept, you test it first. So you'd have that test event first. But then prior to that, maybe there needs to be smaller collaborations amongst other wrestling promotions in order for everyone to get that familiarity with working with one another. Because again, like I'm under no illusions as well. Like I'm a different animal to everyone else. Like I'm like, and like anyone who's done any collaborations with me will tell you I'm a nightmare, because like I'm very much like, I take things in my stride. I don't panic about things. I'm not very much a paperwork guy until the last minute. I often leave things to the last minute because I've got so many different, like I say, plates I'm spinning, right? And because I've had a lot of experiences with these events and etc. I don't panic, and like I'm very chill about stuff that, look, sometimes I should not be chill about, and sometimes it comes back to bite me, and sometimes I'm like, it hits me in the face. But like I think like you could have that mentality. Like if you look at it, you could go into it and be like, oh wow, he's maybe too laid back, maybe he doesn't care. But and I think that people have to get used to working with me to understand my style, what I do, etc., and to understand that I will always come through for you. And I think that that's why I feel like maybe smaller partnerships throughout the year may be something that needs to happen first to then get to that next step, of like, right, now let's tackle something together. But again, it's about just taking it one step at a time and not getting carried away and overexcited, and dealing with this realistically. But I do feel like there's definitely legs in something like that. And hopefully as well, it's something that it's insane, because obviously there's a lot of tribalism in pro wrestling, right? And and it's insane that the AEW, WWE side of things is just absolute insanity. But also on a smaller scale, there's tribalism amongst British wrestling as well.
I didn't realize that until like the last year or so, and I found it absolutely mad. Like, especially with like the RevPros, the Progress, and then it dives deeper into like some of the smaller promotions, and then there's some of the tribalism within like the Welsh scene, and I'm just like, Jesus Lord.
Like every city's got a local scene with like 5 or 6 promotions operating. You might not even know about. They run community centers, little village halls, and they're all feuding with one another, right? And
Crazy.
and it might only be like, look, there might only be 20 loyal supporters of this local promotion, right? But they're vocal, and they will mobilize, and they will move forward, right? And I think that it might be a nice way to bring these fans together, because what I always say is, look, the thing that we're all fighting about, and this is more specifically with AEW and WWE, right? But obviously it does extend to British wrestling, and it's even more ridiculous when you think about the British wrestling example. But we are all we're all fans of professional wrestling, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're fans of pro wrestling. Now, 90% of the population thinks professional wrestling is stupid, right? 90% of the population laughs at professional wrestling. So therefore, we are in that 10% minority. So why are we fighting with each other? We would be much better focused using our energy to say to that 90%, hey, this pro wrestling is actually really special. You guys should come and see it. You guys should be a part of it. You guys should feel what we feel, because we all know as wrestling fans, there's nothing that can replicate that feeling of those moments that professional wrestling can create. And we need to be able to preach that to the wider area. But it's so hard to be able to do that when everyone's fighting with each other. And then someone who's a casual fan who comes in from the outside, they may step their toe in. They may come to a show, love to see it, get involved in social media, then boom, all of a sudden they're away. I'm not about that life. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've not got the energy to dedicate myself to this infighting or getting crucified for having a positive opinion about something that everyone else hates, and like, so this is the thing, like, and hopefully something like that maybe would help bring everyone together, or it might make it even worse. Who knows?
That's the thing. It's literally a double-edged sword. It might just make things worse, or it might make things better. But yeah, unless we try, we'll never actually know, man. But let's get back into RevPro stuff, man. I was discussing with one of my friends. I said this card is probably one of the best cards this weekend, regardless of what company it is. And there's not been any two more integral to this build for Wembley than Michael Oku and Connor Mills. How are you feeling about this feud going into it?
For me, it's a personification of everything Revolution Pro Wrestling is about, because we do deep storytelling, which you might not even realize if you're just, if you're looking at it on a surface level, you may not even realize it. But this story between Michael Oku and Connor Mills has gone for 6 years now. And it's seen so many twists and turns and developments. And I'm so proud to be able to bring it as the main event of what we hope to be our biggest show in history. Because, like I say, there's been so much blood, sweat, and tears, both figuratively and literally gone into this rivalry between Mills and Oku. And it's good old-fashioned professional wrestling at its most base level, good old-fashioned storytelling, and there's a very grey line to good and evil in this one, and I genuinely feel that it's gripping, it's intriguing, and it's one of those contests that, look, it works if you don't know the two guys, you just pick a side, go and enjoy the show, right? But if you do know them, you've got that deeper understanding, that deeper meaning. Throughout the 6 years, you've seen callbacks of things that have happened. You've seen those Easter eggs. You've been rewarded for your patience. You've been rewarded for your loyalty. And this really will be, it feels like anyway, the final chapter in this rivalry. And I think that's one of the things that we've been able to do with RevPro is create these rivalries. So it's not a feud, which, runs for 6 weeks and is then over. It's a rivalry. People don't forget. In real life, people don't forget. If you think someone's a piece of shit, you might stay away from that person for a little while. But when you see him again, you're not going to change your opinion on who those people are. And I hate what I hate in wrestling is when you've got these people who are massive rivals, and then all of a sudden, just because one of them decides they're a good guy, now they're friends, and there's no, and there's no explanation, there's no backstory, there's no reason why. Of course, we can change. Of course, we can be like, oh, I don't mind that guy now, right? But we don't forget the past, right? And I think that's one of the things that we try to do with RevPro. That's why there's so much tension week in, week out at every single RevPro show, because we don't forget the past, I think there's been a great platform. And I think over the last probably 18, 24 months, we've kind of come into our own with our schedule in terms of, you know, we're operating on a weekly basis. It's enabling us a canvas to tell our story consistently. And I mean, it's been great because, you know, it's not one of these things whereby, you know, when we first started operating, maybe we had a show every 6 weeks, you know, when we're talking about, you know, 14 years ago, maybe it was every 8 weeks, right? So you might do something, you might run an angle at show one, then there's 8 weeks between shows, and then you're expecting fans to still be, you know, energized by this, right? A lot of stuff happens in 8 weeks. Do you know what I mean? So like now we're in a situation where if something happens this weekend, so something happens this weekend at Wembley, next week we're at Porchester Hall, right? And you're going to be able to follow up on it straight away. It's a blessing and a curse because we're constantly having to come up with, you know, badass shows, and I think we're delivering. But yeah, it's tough because again, I've seen people say like it's almost because we're very, very consistent. I think we're very consistent at our high level, and I've seen people say, well, the problem with being consistent is everything just after time. If everything's at a good level or a great level, then that just becomes normal. Right.
Standard.
Then what we've got to look forward to, right? So we're constantly having to up our game and pay for our crimes of delivering consistently great professional wrestling. I'm sorry, it's not in my psyche to then be like, we're going to deliver you an average show just so you can appreciate what you're going to get next month. You know, so we're always going to deliver with that level of consistency, but we're always obviously challenging ourselves to up our game a little bit more, and that's kind of what we've been trying to do. But like I say, being able to operate with that schedule is certainly being able to help water these rivalries and help them grow, and that's exactly what's happened with Michael Oku and Connor Mills. And again, look, for me, COVID was the worst and best thing that ever happened to us, because this Michael Oku and Connor Mills rivalry could have been over in a summer, you know, but because of COVID, you rewind and, you know, they were en route for a summer rivalry with one another. And then COVID happened and we did the empty arena tapings. And the mindset was, look, why are these two going to fight? Why are these two going to fight now? Because we've now got a perspective on the world like we've never had before. And now, you know, we're not fighting about silly professional wrestling matches, results, shows, etc. Because now we understand the value of life. Now we understand not to take these things for granted. Now we understand how friendship is so important. So, you know, Mills and Oku reconciled, which then again set the wheels in motion for this long and winding road. And it was some of the highlights. The Destination Everywhere story was some of the highlights of those shows where we came back from lockdown. And it's been a great focus throughout the last 6 years. So it's great that it's all coming to a head now at Wembley Arena. And that's why I say COVID, blessing and a curse at the same time. Financially ruined me, but creatively it made us.
Yeah, no, completely makes sense. In terms of you know, the booking and, you know, just rivalry in general, how much is planned by you, and then how much is kind of like them kind of bringing their creativity to the table?
So the main beats is myself. A lot of the wrinkles will be provided by the talent. I will always give the direction, and then it becomes a collaboration. So I know this is where we need to hit. I know this is where we need to peak. You know, I book the matches, the kind of the flow, all of that stuff. But then when we get to it, when we get to the nitty gritty, it's like, right now it becomes a collaboration, right? And I think that's the best way to work. You have to have an overall vision. You have to have a voice which is in charge, right? Because if you have many voices, that's where stuff becomes muddled, right? Yeah. So I trust my talent to be able to have creative input in what they do. I trust my talent to know their direction and to understand their character. I think a lot of talent is having a deeper understanding than they've ever had before. I think the reason for this is essentially because we're running every week and because we're, you know, doing the backstage comments after every match, after every show. It helps people start thinking about themselves.
I did want to give you RevPro your plaudits, because the backstage stuff that you and Dave have been doing has been absolutely incredible, and I feel like it's definitely added like an added layer to you know, just the production value in terms of like keeping the story moving forward, the storytelling in general. Especially if you're not at the shows, and most of the time, unless you're going to rewatch the shows, or if you're seeing some of the online comments, you might not necessarily get a gauge of maybe how wrestlers are feeling unless they tweet it. Like someone like a TK Cooper, who was always tweeting, but to actually see his promos, and to see like, you know, Brad, to see Michael Oak, just to see them, even just the way they interact with you and Dave has just been really good. So I just one thing I wanted to give you plaudits on, because that's really
thank you, and that's the goal. Yeah, because obviously where we're running different cities on a week by week basis as well, we can't expect everyone. Look, we have a small percent of people who will go to everything, or 90% of our shows, right? But the majority of people will pick and choose. Like they'll have venues which are close to them, which they will go to, or they might go to every other show, or they might just go to every London show, or you know. So what we want to do is we want to make our shows as accessible as possible, and also we want people to not feel like they're so entrenched, but we are so entrenched in our storytelling that they're going to go and they're going to feel like, what on earth is going on? This isn't for me. So we've tried to hit a number of boxes to kind of take away the barrier for entry for our shows, right? So and as well, just to have, again, going into that self-awareness thing again, just to understand that not every single person is going to be able to consume every single piece of content that you produce. There's more high-level professional wrestling on a week-to-week basis than there has ever been in the history of professional wrestling. And you could, even if you make the argument that, oh, you know, we've always had this high quality of wrestling, which we haven't, right? But if you want to make that argument, that's absolutely fine. But it's never been as accessible as it is now. You know, before, if you wanted to watch a New Japan show, I'm aging myself here, but if you wanted to watch a New Japan show, you know, you'd probably read about it in a magazine, and then you'd have to try and get it via a tape trader months after the date, right? If you got yourself a regular hookup, it'd be a few weeks after the date, right? And then even when New Japan first started going online, it was only their big shows which were online, and there was a high price point for entry. Right. Yeah. I can't remember what the price was, but I remember the first G1 they streamed where you could watch every show. I can't remember if it was like 60 or 80 pounds or something like that. But now, you know, you look at it, and that was great value at the time. But you look at it now, and you look at how accessible it is on New Japan World, and you can watch everything. Boom, 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 boom. Look at RevPro on demand. Cheap plug, bargain, great value. Right? you can watch everything for £8 a month. Right. And so now it's just so accessible to everyone. It's like at some point we have to step back and have a life, right? You can't watch everything, you know. Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to break it down as much as possible. So of course we want everyone to watch everything, but we also love that we've got a tool that you can dip in and out. So with RevPro on demand, you know, you don't have to watch everything all at once. You can start watching a show, you can come back to it, you continue watching function, absolutely fantastic. Come back to where you missed out. Right, but you can also pick and choose what shows you want to watch, etc. Right, but what we do is we try to again spell it out for people. So if you want to know, so for example, if you're coming to Wembley this weekend, there are many different things you can have, and again, it depends the level you want to delve into it. Right, so we do a RevPro recap after every show. So in 5 minutes or so, you can see the results of every show. So you can choose how far back you want to go. Do you want to go back a month? Do you want to go back 6 months? Whatever. You can just watch all those 5-minute recaps and you can get caught up very quickly, right? We've got the RevPro wrap-up as well, which is in about 20 minutes. Myself and Dave talk about everything coming out of the show. So you could watch the RevPro recap, follow it up with a RevPro wrap-up, right? Then we've got the backstage comments. So you could watch the RevPro recap, backstage comments, and the wrap-up. And if you want to be extreme, you can watch the show, the recap, wrap-up, comments, etc. Right? Doesn't matter. But like any of those one things in isolation will help you get caught up in a short amount of time. Right? And then in addition to that, for the fans that are there live on the day, we always start every single show with a previously on RevPro. Much like an episodic Netflix drama. You know, I'm a big connoisseur of my TV series. And I love how when you watch a TV series, you know, it's like you've got a previously on, and it just gives you a few bookmarks, things to watch out, because stuff that happened in previous episodes that you might have forgotten about, right?
Just that are going to this next episode,
right? Yeah, exactly. And that's what we do prior to every show in about 2 minutes, right? So we try to remove as many barriers for entry as possible, and we try to make our product as accessible as possible. And know that if you watch none of this stuff at all, you can still go and enjoy it for being great professional wrestling. You just get a further level of understanding, further level of enjoyment, and a bigger reward for your loyalty if you consume all our different forms of media, so to speak. So that's basically been the game plan. That's been the mindset, and that's something that we've had. I just felt we had to do when we started increasing our schedule, because it's hard enough for me to keep up with what's going on a week-to-week basis without the fans. I live this on a day-to-day basis. This is my life without the fans. So this is why we have to do all of this. Well, we don't have to, but this is why we choose to do this stuff.
And it's paying off, because I think the first time I started seeing it properly was around the time you guys started doing the Shah Samuel story, when he was teasing retirement. So just to even just see the evolution of him feeling like he's just going to retire, to then him eventually now winning the British title, it was proper good to see, because a lot of these shows I weren't at. So to be able to watch the shows online, but then to now see the comments after, it's like it adds like a little human element to the wrestlers, because they're going to wrestle and you're going to see them cut promos, but then it now allowed them to just have 2-3 minutes by themselves, just getting their shit off, not necessarily being poked with questions, but them just saying how they feel. Speaking of Shah, is he going to be at the show? He's not at the show. I see he's did a lot of tweeting.
No comment. We're choosing to ignore it right now. Look, if you genuinely, if you look at what he did to Dave, it's tough, because it was of course, from a human level, of course, I don't want to see Shah missing out on the anniversary show, but again, at some point, actions have consequences, and at some point, where do you draw the line, right? 100%. So I don't really want to talk about it too much, but I think it's just it's a tough situation. I still personally like Shah a lot. We've not really spoken about it beyond that day, which is kind of almost out of choice. I think maybe I've been a bit of a coward in the situation, if I'm being honest. Again, Shah, if you look at across the course of Shah's career, he's had a habit of getting a little bit carried away, and perhaps we've not been as strict as we should have been. I don't know, but it's a difficult situation. So but we'll talk again, and see where we land. But look, the show, if you look at the show, we're this weekend is jam packed from top to bottom. So
this card is like Zack Sabre Jr. versus Jay Joshua. Zack Sabre is someone who's been synonymous with RevPro for a very, very long time. He was always most likely going to be on the show anyways, but what does it mean to have him on this particular show for you?
Oh, so much, because look, Zack Sabre Jr., he was there on the very first show. The very first Revolution Pro Wrestling show featured Zack Sabre Jr. versus Johnny Gargano. And it was almost like a statement of intent in terms of the levels of pro wrestling, because Johnny Gargano at the time was one of the bright stars in independent wrestling. He didn't necessarily have a huge name for himself at that stage, but he had that that underswell of support behind him, almost like that underground star. But we've kind of become synonymous with platforming over the years. And Zack Sabre Jr., obviously best in class when it comes to, just a technical game of professional wrestling, and just, being able to essentially modernize that British style of professional wrestling and mold it with so many different other styles of professional wrestling. So, and he's always been a great ambassador for us at RevPro throughout the years. Even when he lived in America for maybe a year, 2 years, he was still coming backwards and forwards for RevPro shows. I was trying to think of the name of the airline we used to fly him on, but I can't remember the name now. It went bankrupt. There was a couple of people who had flights on that airline. It was like the airline. It was essentially like the Ryanair of international flights, right? And I can't remember the name, but we got bit one time. It went bankrupt. The rest of us went to the airport to get their flight, and he's like, "Airline's gone bankrupt. All flights cancelled. No one's getting any money back." Right? But whatever that airline was, he used to go back and forth on this economy airline, where you didn't get a meal included in your flight and whatever. and like he'd work our events on that consistent and regular basis. And he made a promise. He said, like, I'll always be a part of Revolution Pro Wrestling in some form. And it's so humbling when you've got a wrestler of his stature, he's done everything that he's chosen to do, like everything that he's set out to do in this business, he's achieved, right? Yeah. And he's done it on his terms. And to have him being willing and happy to come back and continue to support Revolution Pro Wrestling and acknowledge a part in the development of his career is something which is truly humbling. And look, we've seen it throughout the years. Look at Will Ospreay. Will Ospreay, time and time again, came back to Revolution Pro Wrestling when he didn't need to. He'd signed that huge money deal with AEW, and he still produced a career best performance against Michael Oku at Crystal Palace National Sports Centre at high stakes that year. And look, honestly, he didn't need to do that because he'd already signed the deal. Essentially, he was in a situation where he'd said to us, this is what's happening. And we could have finished up with him prior to that, but he was like, I want to do one last big house for you guys. I want to be able to help pass the torch. I want to be able to shine a spotlight on, the RevPro talent. And I want to say thank you for the opportunities that I was afforded over the years. And I take no credit for Will Ospreay's success. All we've ever done is platform him and put him in positions to succeed and believe in him. That's all we've done. Give him that belief, right? And after that, it's all down to him, and he's smashed it out the park every time, and he repaid us, right? And it's almost poetic that he's going to be main eventing, one of the biggest wrestling shows of the entire year, one of the biggest wrestling shows in history, on Sunday, 24 hours after our anniversary show. But, when you see people like that, and for example, someone like Pac, who I worked with a lot in his early career, and he came back to us. The first shows on the independents he did were with Revolution Pro Wrestling. He's not done an independent wrestling show in years, and he's coming back for us this weekend to wrestle Luke Jacobs. So it's so humbling when you've got people like that who want to come and kind of say thank you to Revolution Pro Wrestling, and they want to continue to water this bed of flowers that is British professional wrestling, because that's what they're doing. They're helping safeguard the future of British professional wrestling, and they help legitimize it, and they help bring new eyeballs to it, and it is so special to be able to do. And then on the flip side, you've got people who've never worked for us before, but have that stature within the wrestling industry who want to come in and help. And I'm talking about FTR, right? And they want to kind of come and kind of, again, they're in the argument for being the greatest tag team of all time. And they want to experience Revolution Pro Wrestling. They want to experience a British crowds. They want experience with British independent crowds. Well, I say independent, it's a New Japan Pro Wrestling show that we produced for New Japan. But few people forget that match they had with Aussie Open. They want to experience that again. They want to feel that again. They want to help the tag team scene, and they want to kind of help bring some eyeballs to Revolution Pro Wrestling. And I think when I look at what FTR have done here coming in for this show, it's almost very reminiscent of what Mercedes Moné did for us throughout last year and towards the start of this year. She didn't have to do any of those things, but she put so many eyeballs on RevPro and helped us grow. And that, that is humbling as well, having legends of this sport and living legends of this sport and people who are still in their primes want to come and be a part of this. It's a very big tip of the hat to what we're doing. And look, I think that the guys and girls on our roster can be so proud of the fact that people still want to do that and people still want to be involved because they see the graft, they see the hard work, they see it week in, week out, and they want to help, they want to contribute, and they want to be a part of it.
100%. Just want to quickly touch on the women's division. Kanji, Alexis Falcon. I would say Alexis Falcon is probably having a career 10 months. I feel like the last 10 months that she's had, even just last year, I feel like it's been absolutely incredible. We saw Kanji win the inaugural Women's Grand Prix. How deliberate was the Grand Prix build towards Wembley?
So it was like, so our mindset is we wanted to kind of have, so if you look at our championships, okay, so the Cruiserweight Championship, the British J Cup decided who was going to Wembley. The Heavyweight Championship, the Revolution Rumble decided who was going to Wembley. And we wanted to provide something for our women's division as well. We wanted to make a statement piece with our women's Grand Prix. We wanted to go big basically and include representation from all over the world. And I think when you talk about one night performances, I think that it's going to be very hard pressed to find a one night performance as good as Kanji on that night. And it was for me, it was a real crowning moment in this journey that she's been on. And like you say, when you talk about Alexis Falcon having a career-defining run right now, I think you're very fair in that estimation, because Alexis Falcon, I've been saying it for the last few months now, she's one of my favorite wrestlers to watch in Revolution Pro Wrestling. She's a fantastic character. She knows who she is inside out. But I think one of the most important things not to forget is she's absolutely no slouch in the ring. She can mix it up with anyone, any style on any given day, and I think that's what makes her so interesting, and what makes her so intriguing. I feel like this rivalry, look, you can see where it started, and again, Mercedes Moné, a catalyst for it all. When you look at the beats of a story, and technically it all started at High Stakes 2025 when Mercedes Moné defeated Kanji, and essentially in that moment, that crowning moment for Kanji, even in defeat, she put the eyes of the wrestling world upon her, and she almost became the uncrowned champion in Revolution Pro Wrestling. But we know that not all journeys are straightforward. There was a lot of twists and turns, and Kanji had kind of put her rivalry with Mercedes Moné to a side to become almost a student teacher, to always have a mentorship from Mercedes. And then you've got the ruthless Alexis Falcon, who's like, what are you doing? Why are you you're stopping your career development by, I don't want to use the words that Alexis used, but you're stopping your career development to watch Mercedes bang. Essentially, that's a PG version of what Alexis was saying. And then we saw this other side of Kanji, because Kanji's always been a cool operator who, bell to bell, she's a killer, right? But after the bell, and that's what I always found so I don't want to say intriguing, but it was a nice, just such a nice thing with Kanji. Is like, bell to bell, she's a killer, but the second the bell rings, she's to end the match, she's the nicest human being on planet Earth. She completely transforms, right? Yeah. From bell to bell, right? She comes out smiling, the bell goes and she's an animal. The bell stops, the bell goes again, and she's got compassion for her opponents, etc. Yeah. And she's always been all business in the ring. But Alexis Falcon was able to get in her head like no one else. She was able to turn it personal, and that mentality that space she put Kanji in, it also created one of the most memorable series of matches in our women's division in RevPro history, right? Not just a women's division, RevPro history, with Kanji and Rio, with some of the highest level wrestling you're ever going to see. And that was all brought about because of the mindset that Kanji was in, because of Alexis Falcon. And then almost, when she went through the trials and tribulations of that women's Grand Prix, it put her back in that warrior mindset, that warrior mentality, which suggests that she's going to be unflappable against Alexis Falcon this Saturday at Wembley. But if there's anything we know about Alexis Falcon, if there's a way to get under someone's skin, Alexis Falcon would find it. So it's an intriguing clash. It's something that has been, like I say, I guess, like I say, the origins go back to April 2025, of this rivalry between Alexis and Kanji. They both stand for completely different things when it comes to professional wrestling, polar opposites of one another, but that's where the best rivalries come from. And that's what makes this match so intriguing, so exciting. I believe it's the best build and story we've ever had for one of our women's matches. And I feel that, I think that's a credit to the level of talent that we have in our women's division right now. And I think it's stronger than it's ever been. And the seeds are there for it to keep growing, moving forward. And something that I've always tried to champion is the fact we never look at, at gender, at color, at sexuality, at beliefs. We never look at any of these things to try and tick boxes. We always look for good professional wrestling. Yeah. And good professional wrestling, in my humble opinion, will always win out. The cream will always rise to the top. Of course, there has to be a process. Things take time, right? Yeah. But as long as you go in with the best intentions and you have that mindset of every single person which is here is there on merit and merit alone, then I don't think you can go wrong. And obviously that can bring about some criticism from time to time. And I get that, I really do. But I want every single person to know that you're there because of talent and talent alone. And that's something that I've always been brought up with. That's something that I've always believed in. And that's something that, you know, look, I feel like, you know, given my place in society is something that I've always kind of tried to have that mindset of like, I want to be where I am based around my work ethic, hard work, ability, etc. And I never ever want to be there because I tick a box. And that's the same principles that I try to carry out in business, in life, in everything, you know. And I think that you know, I'm so proud of the development of everyone on our roster and where we've wound up.
It does remind me, because I don't think you'd remember, but there was a tweet that I made last year to the RevPro account, and I asked, so you're doing that RevPro asked, and I was like, oh, Black History Month's coming up. Are you guys doing anything for Black History Month? And you said, what's it called? We make Black history every day. And it's so funny because I was just like, you know, I hear it, but at the same time, what do we mean? But in you explaining what you just said, I totally get what you mean. But do you think, because in terms of that, do you think wrestling companies should acknowledge things like Black History Month or Pride and things of that nature?
I mean, look, I think you can do. Like, I would never look down on someone for acknowledging it. What I would say is, if you're acknowledging it, I hope you're acknowledging it for the right reasons, right? Yeah. So what I hate is people acknowledging something when the only reason they're doing it is to get likes. And look, you can turn around and you can say, look, it is a good thing because regardless, it's raising awareness, right? Yeah. However, I feel it can be counterproductive if you're only doing it to kind of get some positive public relations. My mentality is I've always tried to stay true to myself. And I guess I feel like, you know, look, I answered in that previous thing. I answered about that, you know, we're making Black history every week, right? That kind of statement, right? But like the reality of the situation is I don't feel we need to signpost and say, look at this, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to alienate, because I know what happens and what can happen. And I know, and I don't want to get into a political conversation here, but I know, right, that if you push very hard in one direction, right, what it can do is it can create tension, it can create divisiveness, it can make people think, hang on a minute, you know, what about White History Month, right? And look, we know it's a very nuanced subject. It's a lot deeper than that, right? But what I'm saying is there will be a minority that will use it to push a negative viewpoint, right? And I think what better advert than to, you know, what better advert for Black History Month than looking at a company and saying, we've got a Black owner, you know, look up and down the company and look at the representation, right? And every single person that is being represented, right, they're there on merit and merit alone, right? We don't do stereotypical, like, I hate, again, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but like, for me personally, I hate when you have Black professional wrestlers, right, and they're treated, the way they're treated in the mainstream is like, how do you treat them? Oh, we put them in a Black gang. Do you know what I mean? They can only have Black friends. Like, I'm just like, what? Do you know what I mean? Like, what? Like, what is going on? Right? And then they turn around and they're like, yeah, see, look, we're championing Black wrestlers. We look at this gang. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's like that's not representative of real society, right? And for real society, we all have to live together in harmony, you know, and we can't make any one group more special than another. I believe very firmly in education, so much so. And again, like, I think, you know, as I've got older, I've had a lot more reflection about, you know, about growing up in the UK and about stuff. And I'd be like, I was never really treated, you know, any differently. But I look back and I'm like, I was, right. And I look back at, you know, being over friendly to people when I first meet them because instantly they've got their guard up about me, and just, you know, and when I look back at that, I was always just like, oh, it's just the way I am. I'm a friendly guy, right? But when I look back at what created those mechanisms, I still shit myself when I see a police car, right? and I've always been a law-abiding good person.
But even there's law-abiding citizen as a black person, it's just you never know,
right? And it seems extreme to talk about this. And like, unless you've lived it, you don't know. But that is the struggle that you're constantly going through, right? And I feel like I'd like my role to be, and I'm saying I've got no significant role in society. I run wrestling shows, right? But if I can just create acceptance and normalization that we are all human beings and that we will all get to where we want to be if we work hard enough. We are not going to put barriers in your way because of how you look, what you believe, etc., right? It's all about talent, right? And that's bottom line. And I think that, you know, we don't need to give special treatment to anyone, because if you do, it's almost counterproductive, because then people can turn around and look at it and say, oh, that guy's only there because of X, Y, and Z. And then that can create resentment from a certain section, right? And again, we're talking about minorities of people here.
Yeah.
But there's always people that will use any situation to use it to fight their agenda, right? And so for me, the way I deal with it is the real definition of equality is everyone is treated equally, and what you bring to the table will be where you wind up in my wrestling promotion. And that's kind of just the mentality that I have to kind of try and work with and go with. And like I say, it's a divisive subject. I understand. If you don't agree with me, I absolutely understand, right? But this is something else I'd like to bring back as well. Old school discussion. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if we can have different opinions to one another, right? Absolutely fine, right? You tell me your opinion, I'll tell you mine, right? I might change your mind, you might change my mind, right? We might each have different parts of our argument that change, right? Or we can just agree to disagree and respect one another's opinion, because on matters like this, there really is no right or wrong. And in matters like professional wrestling, which is an art form, which is subjective, which is a creative art, there's no right or wrong. You can have an opinion on a match, you can have an opinion on a wrestler, you know, it's all subjective. It's down to your individual tastes. There's no right or wrong. And that's why, you know, again, when I book shows and I put things on, what I'm trying to do is I appeal to what I would want to see as a professional wrestling fan. And I hope that it's what the vast majority of the public wants to see as professional wrestling fans. And I try to put on as many different styles as possible to try and ensure there is a little bit of something for everyone. So that's my philosophy in kind of everything I do in terms of booking and, you know, who works my shows and who rises to the top, and in terms of the way I put together my shows. So hopefully that, you know, like I say, hopefully that creates a bit of understanding about where I'm coming from. But like, I just don't, I've never been one to kind of, you know, I feel like, I remember this dates back to years. Someone else got upset with me, or quite a few people got upset with me many years ago when everyone was doing the you know, the rainbow shirts, you know, for Pride, and you know, and my mentality was like, well, and you know, saying like that everyone welcome and whatever, and I was like, well, look, everyone is welcome, and it kind of goes without saying. I don't feel like we need to be like, you know, these people are allowed. You know, I don't want to live in a society whereby, just for example, if you're a particular sexuality, you have to look at a sign on the door to be like, oh, I am welcome in this space, right? And I'd like to think it goes without saying that you're welcome in my space, right? Because it is one of the most diverse communities. The professional wrestling world is one of the most diverse and accepting communities, and everyone is welcome. But I just felt like the need to, I'm not going to go out there and have to publicly say it. And I'm also not going to try and monetize a very serious cause, right? You know, I don't want to, you know, I could have created the Pride flag RevPro logos and, you know, made bank on them. but that's not my mentality, right? My mentality is, you know, we don't need to, pro wrestling. That's it. You know, wrestling's on the marquee, and I don't. That's it. And I'd like to think that you can come to our shows without having to worry about politics, without having to worry about your beliefs and sexuality and all of that stuff. I'd like to think that, you know, you come for pro wrestling, you enjoy the pro wrestling, and you have some escapism for those 2, 3, 4, 24 hours that you're in these shows. You notice I say 24 hours because sometimes our shows are like epic. You know, about that time you're in our shows, I don't want you to think about the outside world. I don't want you to think about your troubles that you've had at work or, you know, outside. You know, I just want you to literally just lose all your inhibitions, and I want you to just become focused and immersed on this world you're seeing before you. Again, the same way you do if you get that TV series that you can't, you know, you get to the end of the episode. Like I'm a sucker for this. What I do all the time is like, I'll be like, I can't watch a film. I don't have time to watch a film, but I'll pick a TV series and I'll watch one episode of that TV series. And like 10 episodes later, I'm like, continue watching. Yes, I'm still here. Stop trying to shame me. You know, we're still here. Yeah. Let's keep going. Right. Because you get so immersed in it and you don't think about the outside world, you know? And that's what I want to do with my wrestling shows. So that's why, you know, if you ever feel like, you know, we're not supporting a cause or we're not being as, I don't know. I just want everyone to know we are very friendly people and we are, you know, doing this in the you know, with the best intentions at heart. And what we want to do is, I think there's a real purity in professional wrestling, a real innocence in professional wrestling. And that's what we want to try and keep, because, you know, it's all those aspects of pro wrestling that get you hooked as a child, or in my case anyway, that got me hooked as a child, that I want to keep reminding people of with our shows. And I feel like if you approach our shows with that open mind and just wanting to get lost in the action without trying to overthink things, you're going to have a hell of a time, and it's going to be a great escape, and it's going to be a great way. Because listen, there's nothing better than being able to shout at the top of your lungs and have no one look at you like, oh, that's a weirdo over there shouting, right? It's a great release. It's a great stress release. It's a just great bit of fun. And I think sometimes, and we can all be guilty of it, sometimes we just overthink it.
Yeah, no, I think you've given me a lot of clarity on that, because especially, you know, black platform, and especially that even since we started to see an uptick in seeing more black people at wrestling events. I started wrestling training 2 years ago, and I've started to see an uptick in terms of like black guys, black women actually started their wrestling trainings, and to see certain causes that now get a shout in terms of like, you know, wrestling promotions maybe promoting certain things. I don't know, maybe I was just because I'd see like the landscape of like, I think not even just in terms of wrestling, but I think just in the UK in general, like black history seems to just be like a lost thing. So now, because I'm so heavily invested in wrestling and that's what I'm doing most of the time, I'm just thinking to myself, okay, cool. Like, would it not be cool to just see a bit more people kind of acknowledge Black History Month in that terms? But like you said, you are a black man, you have black people up and down the card, and you present them in a way where they're not looked at as gang members, they're not looked at as thugs, like they're looked at as serious professional wrestlers. So in that case, it's like, you know what you're saying, that makes absolute sense.
Yeah, and I think as well, when you see people like that, because that's what inspires you, right? So I don't know. So there must have been something or someone that made you watch professional wrestling and be like, you know, look, I can do that. I can, you know, and I feel like if you look at someone who's top in class at what they're doing, it can inspire you. And obviously we all look at it, you can make whatever argument you want, but you look at people that look like you. Like my friends always used to joke with me, let's say like black wrestlers, and I'd be like, oh, I love that guy, whatever. And I'd always joke, be like, you always like the black wrestlers, right? I'd never thought about it. You know, honestly, I never thought about it, right? I was just almost attracted towards them. And it's because they look like you, right? They remind you of you. And it's like, you see yourself going through their struggles. And that's why it is so important to have that representation. But like I say, I think it's so important to have that representation of top in class, right? Yeah. Because I think, like, if you look at it, no one liked the shit ones. Do you know what I mean? It's always like the ones that, you know, like one of the standout moments for me as a child was Ron Simmons winning the WCW Heavyweight Championship from Big Van Vader, and that held out that. And again, look, it just, I feel like it was one of the first times I'd seen, so Ron Simmons won, obviously. Everyone's going crazy. You see that little black kid run through the crowd. He's jumping like higher than the guardrail. That was me in my living room, right? It was like, so that happens, right? And you can absolutely feel it. And then another big part of it as well, I think you had all the white wrestlers come in and lift him up on their shoulders. For so long, the black wrestler was a heel in professional wrestling, right?
Yeah.
And you had all the white wrestlers come and lift him up on the shoulders. And, I think there was some champagne involved and whatever, And that moment just stuck with me. I didn't know why, but I feel this is why. Because, you're seeing someone reach for top in class, right? But Ron Simmons was a world-class professional wrestler, right? And if it was someone who was almost forced into that position, who wasn't ready to be in that position, who didn't deserve to be in that position, I genuinely don't think it would have hit the same, right? Yeah. And I feel like when you've got those wrestlers who are top in class, that's what you look towards. And look, I can name check people in our roster who are people of color, but you just look at what they've achieved, what they've accomplished, and you see those people and you're like, that's an inspiration to be like, maybe I can get involved and do this. And again, I just want people to look at the people and just be like, I don't want people to be like, oh, there's lots of black people on this show, therefore I can go and do it. I want people to be inspired by it, to be like they're top in class. I think maybe one of the reasons I support Arsenal is because Arsenal historically have always been a club that have had a lot of black players. Right?
Reed, Arsenal, Campbell, loads of black people.
But it dates back before that, right? Yeah. So, I think that is one of the reasons as well. Because and when you look back in the 90s, when I started getting involved in football, there weren't as many black people in football, and many of them were in Arsenal, right? Yeah. And I think that might have been a reason why I looked towards them. But the thing is, it wasn't a case of Arsenal just having loads of black players. They had world-class players, right? And I feel like if you had a lot of black players on the team, but they were no good, it's not going to help you. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to stir that fire inside your belly the same, right? So that's my mentality anyway. We always do it we always go for best in class, and I think you can really get inspired by that. And the same way I think with our women's division, I think there's a whole generation of women's wrestlers who are coming through right now, because I think when I grew up, again, I'm sure around the Attitude Era, what women's wrestling was is very different to what wrestling is right now. Women's wrestling is right now, right? Yeah. And I think that, if you're a young girl growing up, so it's very interesting actually, because Kanji saw a lot of the Attitude Era stuff, and she that inspired her to be the polar opposite of that. I did a sit-down interview with her a few months back, and she was talking about that stuff, right? Which I found absolutely fascinating, right? And her thought process was, I'm going to be the girl that people look up to. I'm going to create a better example, right? So I found that fascinating. So it can work in that respect as well. But I look at, what happened with the quote unquote women's revolution, and the likes of Mercedes Moné, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, Bailey, Paige, all those girls that came through at that time, hang on, we can actually work. I think that inspired a whole generation of wrestlers, women wrestlers, who may not have even watched the product before, because they'd watch it and then they'd see that horrible representation of women and they would be like, that's not for me, right? Yeah. And I think that inspired a whole generation. And that generation is a generation which is coming through right now. You look at someone like a Sapphire Reed, who grew up on Mercedes Moné, and then she had the opportunity to wrestle her, right? Yeah. And I think that now that generation is still very young and starting to come into their own, right? Yeah. Now what I'm excited for is the next generation, right? Because now people are seeing not just obviously the Mercedes of the world, but they're seeing this next generation of professional wrestler come through, and on an independent level, they're seeing a higher level of talent as well. So then they're getting invested. Now they're going to the training schools, and you see those numbers slowly but surely grow. Right? British wrestling was not an overnight success. British wrestling took years and years to get where it is. The Attitude Era, when you look at when, we started, I guess, my journey in terms of booking started in about 2004, 2005, right? what we saw in those early days was people who were influenced by Attitude Era professional wrestling, where there was a big boom and therefore a big influx of people into professional wrestling training schools, which there hadn't been before.
Yeah.
You know, and as a result, we were able to start to craft a foundation. But from that foundation, created eyeballs, people saying there is a British wrestling product, you know. So, and oh, wow, where did these people learn how to wrestle? Oh, I'm going to try out one of those training schools. Then more training schools started to pop up. You know, when I first started, like I trained as a referee, right? I lived in Southend, Essex. I had to travel to Portsmouth 3.5 hours to do this, right? It wasn't somewhere locally where I could kind of get involved, right?
Yeah.
So that was my level of dedication. But now I think, like, if you want to learn how to wrestle, you're probably going to find a training school within half an hour of your house, right?
Yeah.
And that's a difference now, right? And I think that the more people that go to training schools, the more representation you're going to see further down the line. But it's no good in taking people before they're ready and putting them in those positions, because it's going to have a negative effect. But if you're finding world beaters and you're putting them in those positions, then that's going to inspire the next generation. It's going to make people work harder, you know, and we're going to continue to grow and evolve and flourish, right? Yeah. So whilst we're in a very good state right now, I think 2 years down the line, 2 years further down the line, we're going to be in an even better state. And that's what's so exciting. And you look at, again, the depth up and down our roster, it just, you know, it illustrates that point that I've just made. If you look at our roster now, you can say we were in a bigger boom period then, because we could sell tickets easier, and we could announce a show and we could sell tickets easier. But it wasn't our wrestlers that were selling the tickets. It was the AJ Styles of the world, you know, it's the Kenny Omegas, the Young Bucks, you know, they were the guys that were selling the tickets. You know, our New Japan relationships, Tanahashi, Okada, Nakamura, etc. They were the guys that selling the tickets. Right, but we'd be able to put one of those shows on sale and boom, sell tickets straight away. Now we have to work a lot harder for people to purchase tickets, but that's also a reflection of the time as well, I believe. You know, people have got a lot less money now, and therefore, if someone's going to spend their money on your product, you can take a real sense of pride and take it a compliment, because, you know, people are investing their hard-earned money in what you're producing, but also the stars of a show now are our homegrown talent. And I think that's what makes a big difference. And that's why you look at the roster now to what it was then, and you can see the depth up and down, and you can see we're doing something right. And long may it continue. And I think that Saturday's card is very much a reflection of that point.
Yeah. Outside of the matches that we've spoken about, we spoke about Pac, Luke Jacobs, FTR, Cowboy Way, obviously Maka Oku, Connor Mills. What would you say is like the dark horse match that you think people need to pay attention to, and not necessarily, you know, people might have certain matches that they're looking forward to the most, but what's a match that you're thinking, this is the match that is going to deliver and people are probably not expecting it?
I think the match is Liam Slater versus Leon Slater. That's what I'm going to say. And look, people know Leon Slater is one of the best wrestlers in the world, but I think Liam Slater to a lot of people is perhaps an unknown quantity. I've seen people saying like, oh, you know, Leon Slater is one of the few wrestlers you could put him in a dream match, right, and get people excited. But if you look at the story that Liam and Leon have been telling, fantastic. You look at Liam Slater's body of work, one of the most underrated wrestlers in the world right now. There's not many people who have a mind for professional wrestling like Liam Slater. And I've been around all the minds in professional wrestling, and Liam Slater is one of the smartest guys that I know. When it comes to professional wrestling and when it comes to the nuances of professional wrestling. Leon and Liam know each other inside out. Again, every story that's told in wrestling, the best and most effective ones are seeded in reality. The story of Liam and Leon Slater is so real. You know, Leon was Liam's star student. You know, when every big match that Leon had, Liam strategized for that match with him. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Here's something that would look good, etc., etc. Liam has been by his side for his biggest achievements and his biggest failures. Liam knows Leon inside out, and when you get chemistry like that, it's few and far between. And I genuinely believe that Liam Slater's gonna, you know, open a lot of eyeballs this weekend. And again, it's just another opportunity for Leon Slater to show he's the best in the world. You know, he's not here to make up numbers, and he means this. You know, Leon Slater Again, he's another one of those wrestlers who, you know, I spoke about Zack Sabre Jr., about Pac, you know, about Will Ospreay, how much, you know, RevPro means to these guys who are taking it to another level, but they're still coming back and helping out and doing what they can. You know, Leon Slater's getting on a red eye from America on Friday night, landing in the UK, 11 a.m., and he's going to smash it out the park, guaranteed. He doesn't have to do it. He wants to do it. It reminds me of, you know, when Leon Slater and Michael Oku, ahead of High Stakes last year, they both flew in from America, landed similar times, you know, started, you know, maybe midday, just after midday, straight to Doncaster, and had one of the matches of their lives at the Doncaster Dome. Just phenomenal professional wrestling match on zero sleep, all that travel, because that's how much this means to them. And that is the hunger, the drive, the desire, the determination. And you need all those attributes if you're going to make it to the top of your profession. They possess it in spades. And that's why they are where they are right now. And again, that's another, it's a humble moment for me when I see a young lad like Leon Slater, who's literally got the world at his feet, and he still wants to be involved, and he's still asking questions, and he's still hungry. He's not let the ego, he's not developed an ego. He's not let it go to his head. He's remained humble. And it's those character traits which are why he will wind up as one of the top guys in the entire business.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to this show, man. Honestly, I think like I said, you've got an incredible roster. The stories being told going into this show is world class, and I know it's going to be an amazing 14-year anniversary. You spent 14 years watching people walk through RevPro doors and become stars. What's one moment you're most proud of?
It's almost an impossible question, because I always give the answer: Bret Hart and Tanahashi stood side by side. For me, look, what we've always tried to do with RevPro is we've always tried to acknowledge the past of Revolution Pro Wrestling, not of Revolution, of wrestling in general. Acknowledge the past, think about the present, and look towards the future. So there's moments where we've had those times. So one was obviously that Bret Hart and Tanahashi thing. That was a big personal thing for me. I think they're two of the greatest performers of their generations. We had the moment when Thunder Strikes, Jushin Thunder Liger, Mark Rollerball Rocco, and Prince Devitt, of course Finn Balor, stood side by side with the Cruiserweight Championship in the middle. I think last year we had a similar moment with Jushin Thunder Liger, Robbie X, and Nino Bryant, right? So just any moment where we've been able to tip our hat to the past of professional wrestling, acknowledge the past, and thank those that came before us, and look forward to the future. They've always been big moments for us. So I'm going to use those moments as examples. But look, throughout the course of our time, we've had just so many moments like that, you know. And again, looking towards the future, there was that moment at the end of High Stakes 2020 before the world went kaput, where we had Giselle Shaw, Will Ospreay, and Michael Oku stood side by side with their respective championships they had won on that night to really flag post. This is a new era of Revolution Pro Wrestling. Get excited for this next year in Rev Pro, because there ain't no turning back, and you know we're going to smash it. You know, we were on an upturn. We were on such a, you know, we'd been beaten, and we were like, everyone was, you know, we were like, really had to start to rebuild. We'd lost the NXT UK guys. We were getting diminishing returns on using our imported talent, because it had become commonplace. People had started taking them for granted. We recognized we had to build homegrown stars. And, you know, this was a real flagship moment for us of this is what you can expect moving forward. And it felt like a real moment. We sold out York Hall again after people said it wasn't going to be possible to do again, and we did it. And we got it may have been the first 5-star rated match by Dave Meltzer in kind of Rev Pro history, and I think probably in British wrestling history. And it was a real sense of achievement, right? And then boom, we went into lockdown. But that was a moment as well where I kind of defiantly looked out and was like, yeah, we've done it. You know, and just any moments like that, really. Obviously, that first getting that first empty arena taping across the line during COVID was a big achievement. Coming back from COVID was a huge achievement as well. And then the landmarks that come from there. The first time we go back to York Hall from COVID. And I remember, you know, I listened to a podcast recently that Dave Mastiff did, and he was talking about, you know, NXT UK and BT Sports Studios, and he was just saying about how long they held on to restrictions and whatever. And he said, we done, you know, to just illustrate it, we did a show at BT Sports Studio in front of no one. And then a couple of days later, RevPro came to York Hall with a sold out crowd, with the life, the energy, the excitement, you know, and we brought wrestling back. And I genuinely believe that. I genuinely believe we brought wrestling back. That high level of professional wrestling we brought back in the UK, and we kind of showed people there's hope, and we showed people that, you know, against all odds, we're going to keep moving forward and we're going to keep coming out swinging. And I think those are the moments that I'm most proud of. Those moments we've kind of stepped up against all odds, and we proved our doubters wrong. And again, I think there's a real sense of achievement in that, and I hope that we have a defining moment this coming Saturday. But look, win, lose or draw this Saturday, I'm proud of how far we've come, and I'm proud of kind of you know, the position we are going into this show, and the fact that we have been able to do it. Look, we've chosen to do it the hard way. We could have literally been like, right, let's find all the big money imports, put them in those prime positions, and let's make a statement with the crowds. But like, the reality of it is, what statement are you making? You know, you're selling tickets off of other people's names. You know, we want to sell tickets based off of our wrestlers' names, because we want to show everyone the potential. I'm not saying this isn't the finish line, and this isn't, you know, look, I want to show people that, look, maybe in a year's time we're going to come back even stronger. Now, you know, now people know, you know, there's going to be people who sleep on this show and don't come along because they feel like, oh, you know, there's not the big international names, right? Maybe there will be those people, right? But I want those people to, you know, be at home, hopefully watching on demand or on my AEW, or looking at all the hype from everyone who's there and everyone who went to the show. And I want those people to kick themselves for missing out on that event and be like, I'm not making that mistake again, right? This is how we create those solid foundations. We sacrifice, we suffer a little bit in these moments, but we do that because we want to come out stronger the other end. And I hope that anyone who listens to this and any of these interviews that I've done historically will see that I always tell my truth. I believe so firmly in what we're doing, so passionately in what we're doing. And I hope that people hear these words and are like, you know, we're going to take a gamble. We're going to come along. We're going to support this, because this is the only way we can do this, one fan at a time. Like I said, the reality of the situation is we live and die based off of our live gate and based off of our on-demand subscriptions. So if you can support in any one of those ways, it is so appreciated, and you genuinely are a part of helping us grow. We're still at a stage where we're so small that literally every single person counts. And I'd like to think that however big we manage to get, we're still going to understand and realize and respect the fact that every single person counts. So here we are this Saturday, looking to make a statement and looking to feel proud once again.
Two more questions for you, Andy. I don't want to take up more of your time. This has been absolutely excellent, by the way. I'm properly looking forward to Saturday. You've batted on about homegrown and how important it is, and I think you're setting a statement there. How important it is to build the homegrown stars to be able to fill out these big venues, and long may it continue. What made you decide that the promotion needed a school in London? You already had one in Portsmouth. What is it that you couldn't cover alone just in Portsmouth that you thought, you know what, we need to cover ground in London as well?
So we run lots of shows in London. If anything, it'd be easier if we were based in London. So that was one of the main things. We're in London so often. It's also a lot of London-based professional wrestlers as well. Now, something that I always try to do, and like this might be the first time I've said it publicly, but I've said it privately to our trainers at the school, right? So my mentality is, obviously I want to create the best talent, right? We make no secret of the fact that it's very hard. If you're a professional wrestler, you're in the UK, you're a starving artist, right? No one's making you can say, oh, I make a full-time living being a professional wrestler. You're able to make a full-time living being a professional wrestler if you're able to severely subsidize your rent, be that in house shares or be that in living with your parents still or whatever, you know, being lucky enough to not have any big overheads. you know. So it's very hard to create a living, to craft a living as a professional wrestler, you know. Can we create jobs as comparable to, you know, going to, you know, you can make as much money as a, you know, working in a pub, for example, on one professional wrestling show. You can make that same money or more on a night, right? And you add merchandise to it, and that adds up a little bit more. But the thing is, the consistency of the work isn't there the same way it is doing shift work. And if you're doing and naturally, as a professional wrestler, you're kind of taking on shift work because you can't commit to. It's difficult to commit because, you know, most of your bookings happen at weekends, right? So and like you know, you got to go to the gym, you got to train, you know, you got to study, you know. There's so many different aspects to it, and wrestling's an expensive business as well. You know, you got to buy your gear, you got to buy your supplements, the right foods, etc. So wrestling's just a very tough business, right? And I looked at it as an opportunity for the Revolution Pro Wrestling name. I believe carries a lot of weight. I believe we've got a lot of history in bringing people through our training schools. And I think that if we can use that to help enable our talent, so what we tried to do, we tried to make it the most affordable training school around as well, especially when you look at London prices. And I'm not saying, look, I'm not saying that any other school is too expensive, because I believe that every school provides a great value and provides, you know, different aspects. And I always encourage people to go to as many different schools as possible. I don't like the mindset of you should only go to one place. Right? I think it's good to have one voice you listen to above others. I do, because you know, because otherwise you can get confused. Because, like I say, wrestling is so subjective. You know, if you're listening to too many different opinions, you lose focus, right?
Yeah.
I always say with focus, the acronym is follow one course until success, right? So obviously you need to make sure you're focusing on the right things and the right path. But I always think it's great to have the right voices around you. And those voices, if they're good voices, they will encourage you to go out and work different places to get different aspects. And that's the same reason why training schools bring in guest trainers as well, because they want you to hear different voices, because they want you to learn different styles, etc. So I'm all for people going out and learning different styles, etc. But what I've tried to do is create something which is affordable. And all I want to do, I said, like, I'm not personally, look, would it be great if I made loads of money out of it? Yeah, it would, right? But the reality of the situation is we try to operate the London school in a way where essentially I don't lose money. The trainers all get paid for taking the training sessions and can supplement their income during the week. You know, so at times when obviously they don't have shows, so they can create a little bit more money. So it's just my way of trying to give back to the industry a little bit more, and to have that as the goal, rather than being like, you know, look, we're trying to, because look, the core business is the live events, right? This is a separate company, and we're trying to do is be able to pay our talents to be able to take those sessions and give them a little bit more pocket money, and trying to create some new professional wrestlers, trying to get people as infected to the wrestling bug as we all are. And then in turn, obviously, I get the benefit of, you know, when we run shows, we've got an army of helpers. You know, we've got an army of helpers in London, we've got an army of helpers in Portsmouth, you know, they all mix with one another, etc. And I think it's great. And we have like times when our Portsmouth trainees go down to the London school, London's trainees come up to, the Portsmouth trainees go up to London, the London trainees go down to Portsmouth, and just get those crossover things. One thing that's going to be coming up in the near future is, it's one of those things is so frustrating, because obviously we've been working on it, the mindset of what we want to do, but again, it's that spinning plates thing. But we're going to start to see shows with representation, our London school shows, basically. So we have Portsmouth school shows already. We're going to start to see London school shows. This is where we're going to actually introduce a Chapman Cup, what we spoke about last year during Curtis Chapman's Fame induction. And the idea will be, it's going to start with, you can have 2 matches in the London school. It was basically tournament sides, right? So basically semi-finals Portsmouth, semi-finals in London, a Portsmouth final, a London final. Then on a main show, they will meet for the first ever Chapman Cup winner, and then the Chapman Cup will be defended across our professional wrestling, across our trainee shows. And then I think the working idea, and again, bearing in mind this could change, but the working idea for it is that cup will be defended on those shows, And when a wrestler is ready, they can use it to then cash it in to challenge for a main show championship, whatever that may be, right? So they have to make the decision on when they're ready to do such a thing. And that's kind of the idea behind it. But like, again, like I say, I want our fingerprints to be all over the professional wrestling industry. And again, if there's we'd happily, I feel like we've got a blueprint on how to operate a wrestling school now. We're always changing things up. Portsmouth is very different to London, for example. The way we do things in Portsmouth is very different to the way we do things in London in terms of the classes. In Portsmouth, we just have a regular beginners class, as an example. In London, we find it works better doing beginners courses, right?
Yeah.
So the way we operate is kind of different from one place to the next, but we're always testing out new classes and new methods and whatever have you. But I feel like we have a blueprint to run in professional wrestling school now. And if there's, for example, if there's a groundswell of professional wrestlers in a certain area, and they say to me, "Can you help us out with a school?" Because I'm in a position with the know-how and obviously can essentially fund a school to begin, because I know ultimately it will come good, right? Yeah. Especially because you make sure you get the right people involved with the training. You look at our school, and the trainers we have: Shah Samuels, Michael Oku, David Francisco, Connor Mills, and now Nino Bryan is taking more sessions. Before that, we had Eddie Dennis. You look at the level of trainer that we have in that immediate vicinity. And then what becomes rewarding is then when you get the people who come through, they're then capable of then being able to take the beginner sessions. When they get to a certain level, they can take the beginner sessions. And in a sense, the money they create from running the beginner sessions then helps them pay for their training for the advanced sessions. So it means this thing that they're investing all this time and money, and it becomes a little bit more affordable for them, because it's like the same as because again, whenever anyone starts wrestling, it starts as a hobby, right? And our main goal for everyone is to turn a passion into a profession.
Yeah.
Until we get a TV deal, until we start, getting these arenas on wouldn't it be nice? Imagine if we could run a live event in an arena on a monthly or bi-monthly basis that sells out, and that creates a revenue that then enables us to pay the wrestlers like they deserve to be paid, right? Yeah. That would be fantastic. But until we get to that, we have to be as resourceful as possible in order to try and keep our wrestlers around for as long as possible. Because again, there are a lot of wrestlers. When I first started running shows, you can look at the names up and down the shows, and this predates RevPro. You can look at the names up and down the card, and there were so many wrestlers that had talent, that had potential, that you could look at as can't miss successes. But then they had to grow up. They got to a time when it's like, I've got a family, I've got responsibilities, I can't do this anymore. So we'll never they were never able to achieve that potential. And right now, there's more realistic ways than ever for someone to come in and achieve that potential. However, because again, you've got AEW now, you've got WWE paying more money, you've got NXT, you've got TNA giving out contracts, MLW giving out contracts, you've got New Japan, you've got CMLL, there's all these avenues where people can create a realistic living in professional wrestling that they probably wouldn't have dreamed of when they started pro wrestling, right? But to get there, somehow we have to bridge the gap, right? So little things like this are what we can do to help bridge the gap, whilst also helping bring along the next generation of professional wrestler. So in my crazy mind, it just makes sense. It's a logical step to take. So, if there's a group of wrestlers, like I say, in another area where they're like, hey, because the thing is, there has to be a group. Yeah. It can't be one wrestler, because obviously one wrestler isn't going to take responsibility for that school. Because as you get to a level, you're then going to wind up having to go other places and whatever. Yeah. So we would have one wrestler who's essentially the manager, so to speak, but then in terms of who deals directly with myself, but then we need a sea of trainers. Right. And if there's ever, like an area, where there's 5-6 wrestlers who, are together and like, oh, we could use more money. And they come to me, like, we can put together a business plan. We can put together how this could potentially work. And, and if it's viable, we'll give it a go. I think with the London squad, I was like, look, we'll give it 12 months. Right. I was like, this is how much it's going to cost. We'll give it 12 months. By the end of the 12 months, I just need to not be losing any money anymore. And we got to that
Yeah.
point, and it was like, right, now we need to get to the point. And I think it was more than 12 months, because the venue we had shut down for like, it was ridiculous. It shut down for a long while, and then reopened and whatever. And then it got to a point was, right, now we've got past that point. Now we need to try and so we're breaking even all the time. Now we need to replenish the money that I've invested in it, and then we need to try and start turning a profit. And then that's where we can look at it and be like, right, now let's see what else we can do, where else we can invest, where else we can, pay our guys a little bit more money, and whatever have you. And we have to do it in a modest way. But it's just, to me, it just makes logical sense. It's kind of, with our history and knowing what we know and what to do, etc. It's one of those things that I will always continue to try and reinvest in this sport and put my money where my mouth is, so to speak. So that's what we try to do. It's not been to try and be in competition with anyone else. It's almost been, again, to try and, cater for a market, and make sure that there are, it's just to give people options of more places to train. And again, where I think we tried to come in at just such an affordable price point, like, I think it's a great way for people to also supplement their training from other places to pop along to our place, with no commitments and whatever have you, and see what we're all about. And I think that's that's the way we've tried to operate. And I think that it's been a success so far. We're starting to see some of our London trainees start to break out to other places. And we've seen, look, from every 100 trainees that come through the door, there's probably 10 that are going to make it, right?
Yeah.
And that's not down to the training. That's down to character. That's down to those mentalities. Along the way, there are so many things that can. I'm sure you've experienced it with your wrestling journey, right? There are so many distractions that could stop you. There are so many things that could see you making excuses. I'm sure you've seen fellow trainees who, you've looked up to people and been like, oh, that guy's great. That guy's going to be great. And then all of a sudden they just disappear for 6 weeks, right? Yeah. And then they turn back up, and then everyone else has surpassed them, and they come back and they're like, oh, what's going on? And then they get demotivated, right? Yeah. That's a tale as old as time, and you often find that the people that come in on day one, where it comes easy to them, when they find those obstacles and those hurdles, they're not as willing to kind of overcome those hurdles, because they're like, wow, this has suddenly got hard. This thing that I was excelling at and getting pats on the back for every single week, it's not happening anymore. I don't like that feeling, So there are many different reasons why someone won't achieve their potential. So we just want to do everything we can to ensure that we get those numbers up, and we kind of get more talent in the pool of British professional wrestling. And you can look at it and go like, wow, there's way too much. There's too much talent already. You can never have too much talent. You can never have too much talent.
More talent the merrier.
Yeah, and it keeps everyone hungry.
Yeah, 100%. So I've trained at RevPro a couple of times, and everything you're saying, like I've like SSD, Sammy St. Daniels, training from a hustle as well. He's an absolute talent. And even just seeing him at the on a RevPro show, we all celebrated it, because just like, we know how hard this guy works. We know how good this guy is week in, week out. Like, he's one of the best I've seen.
Yeah, and some of the stress as well. It's like, so he's obviously trained in the hustle school, and obviously he trains with us as well in London from time to time. And he's someone who, I think, I want to say, where he first came on our radar was when he worked with, I'm not sure if he'd done training with, but he worked with David Francisco, and he worked with Michael Oku, who are trainers at our school. And they both put him over huge. And the one thing that I want to stress is that just because he trains at Hustle, it's not something whereby we'll look at it and be like, oh, well, we can't bring him into RevPro because he's not come through our school. He's not a RevPro guy, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. Like I say, again, cream rises to the top. And Hustler got some good guys, good talent coming through the Hustle school. Like, and I think that's great to see. And like I see some of the aesthetics from the Hustle school as well is great. And those shows as well, man, the energy that you see in those shows. Like, I watch as much as I can of everything. And like I say, I think that, you know, it's different environments. You learn different things in different places. But there's never, you know, there's never going to be handcuffs put on you because of where you train, especially where Revolution Pro Wrestling is concerned. The cream will always rise to the top. And Sam St. Daniels is he's real good. And I think he's someone who, look, again, his situation was he was someone we brought in kind of last minute. But you know, he showed me enough in that time where he's got a ton of potential. I gave him a bit of feedback coming off the back of it, and he's definitely someone who's we'll bring back in, and we'll see if he's listened to that feedback. Because again, the tools are all there, the look is there, the mechanics are all there. You know, he does everything right. You know, and I feel like you know, a couple of small adjustments, he'll become a world beater, right? And we'll bring him back in. We'll see how he does. And, you know, and again, the only thing that we look for is to see if he's listened to that feedback and taken it on board. You know, we're not expecting anyone to become a finished article overnight. But like, yeah, he's a good talent. And I think that, and I love to hear that, you know, you guys celebrated him getting on that stage, because that's what it's all about, you know, and seeing that this stuff is attainable. Because I think when you start to realize that stuff like this is attainable, that's where it starts to get exciting, you know, because it should motivate. You know, there's two schools of thought. Some people, you know, you see something like that and you're like, oh, why is it not me? Right. But like, for sure, the most successful people, you're proud of their achievements, you're proud of their accomplishments. You know, we see it all the time. You know, we see it with guys come into our training school. You got guys like Cameron Kai, for example, came through our Portsmouth school, and he's someone who, after 3 months of training, was on a level, if not better, than people who trained for 3 years, right? Because he's just a natural at this, right? And there are some people who might look at that and then be like, I've been toiling for all this time and Kai's been here a few months and he's getting all these opportunities, right? But the level-headed people will be like, well, Kai's out of this world, right? And everything that Kai does, which is a success, it's going to encourage myself to bring more people through our training school, you know? And you know, if I can show what I can do with Kai in training, maybe that'll open the door for me, as an example. You know, so I think it's all about that mentality, that character, and anyone who's got that mentality and character, they will rise to the top.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, like, what is your scouting process like? Obviously, you've got the two schools, so you'd have the trainees going through the contender series, like the contendership through there. But in terms of people that are maybe still on the circuit at the moment, who maybe are like 2-3 years in, but is it more of a thing of word of mouth, or are they wrestlers that you're actively seeking, or like, what's the process in terms of that kind of scouting?
So look, an example I'll give you. So at the moment, we're looking for tag teams. So I don't always say to people all the time, like, get a tag team, be in a tag team, you know, work as a team, know each other inside out. It's a rare commodity. So we're looking. We're always looking. So at the moment, we're looking for tag teams. So I'll specifically look. So right now, I'll specifically go out and I'll look at tag teams and I'll ask people for recommendations specifically for tag teams, right? That's just an example. But we're always on the lookout for new talent. And obviously, there's so many different ways that we can find that talent. So, you know, I've got trusted lieutenants in my locker room that will obviously always point out names, and everyone gets one, right? Everyone gets one recommendation. Right, they recommend someone. If that person is not up to scratch when they come, they don't get another recommendation. Right? So I've got trusted people who kind of put forward names, right? And if they're willing to go back for someone, right, then I will give them an opportunity. Right. There's often people who give me names and I'll be like, okay, get me footage, and I'll watch footage of people and I'll be like, well, you need to work on this, that, and the other. Sometimes I'll see it, sometimes I won't see something in them. But again, it's very hard to gauge when you're looking through a computer screen at someone, you know, but often you get a real feel for you know, how they're going to do. An example I'll give you, I've used him recently in a podcast, so I won't say too much because I don't want to give him a big head, but Franco Fate is an example of someone who I've recently used. Now, I watched tapes of him. I watched a few different matches of him. I watched a highlight reel of him, and I had recommendation of some of the top people in the industry who I trust, right? And multiple, not just one, multiple, right? And I watched him and I was like, he's good, right? And then when I put him on a show, like, I gave him some feedback based around what I saw of what I watched of him, and he employed that feedback, and he was like night and day from the tape I watched, and he was excellent. He went from good to excellent in that one opportunity. But he's also someone, another reason why I kind of was open to kind of bringing him in as well, was because he's someone who came along to the shows and helped out, right? And he's someone who I feel like in his training school, he's perhaps one of the top dogs of his training school, the House of Pain School in Nottingham. And he had no ego when he came to help out. He would have done any job and got involved with any job. And often you got the top boys at the schools, they don't want to help out, and again, I'm not persecuting you if you don't help out or you don't want to help out, but I'm watching, and if you do help out, it tells me a lot about your character. And that's the type of person I want in a locker room. That's the type of person I want to be around, right?
Yeah.
Also, I'd say as well is if your inclination is to not want to help out, and if you're doing it from means to the end, you will get found out, right?
Yeah.
Because there's people who say all the right things and do all the right things till they get what they want, and then all of that stops, right?
Yeah.
And the second that stops, it becomes noticeable, and you realize they're not perhaps a character that you thought they were. And it's not to say like, I only want people who are going to help out, right? But it's just like, if that's the version of you you're presenting, and you're like, okay, this is what I want to work with, because I want those people who are selfless, and because it's very many of those traits that you have when you're helping out, you need in your professional wrestling career, being selfless, right? Yeah. And if you find out that that was all a work, so to speak, then all of a sudden they're not the person you thought they were, right? Yeah. And then it makes it a lot harder to kind of put your faith and trust in them. So, that's kind of one of the things as well we look out for, that mentality, the character. We listen to people. You make a name for yourself elsewhere. Obviously, we can. It is something that's easy to latch onto. Obviously, I'm interested in people who are more than just professional wrestlers. Like, again, I always say that the easiest part to learn about professional wrestling is the moves, right? I genuinely believe this is like, do not try this at home, folks. But like, I think once you learn the basic bumps, right, anyone can watch any specific wrestling move. You just watch it a few times and you can break it down, and you can figure out how to do said moves. You can introduce a crash mat and you can do the moves. Obviously, there's exceptions, there are physical limitations and whatever. But like, in terms of the mechanics of professional wrestling, anyone can figure that out. It's everything else surrounding it that are the most important things, are how you piece things together. Your character, your motivation, why you do stuff at certain times, how you play around with stuff, how you place stuff in different places in different matches, how you're able to create patterns in your matches. So anyone who follows you you can then add a curveball in a match to take them in a completely different direction. Understanding your move set, why you do certain things, why even though you can do other things, you don't, because it doesn't suit the purpose, it doesn't suit your character. Understanding your position on a show, not going out there and doing, again, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should, right? Not going out there and doing 100 near falls in the opening match, right? Getting the most out the least, recognizing where the crowd are at their peak, and either taking it home at that point or getting them to another level, right? Yeah. Not breaking it up and letting it drop down and then having to build all over again, right? So all these different things are the stuff that I'm looking out for. And those are those things that, to me, if you think you're ready, right, before you present yourself to me, because again, you very limited time, because I see so much wrestling, I'm so busy on a week-to-week basis. And again, I'm not saying that Revolution Pro Wrestling is anything special, right? But
I mean, Wembley would say different, but
yeah, look, I'm trying to remain humble in all of this, because I don't want people to. I don't want to come across as. I don't want to come across as arrogant in all of this, right? Like, but we preach pro wrestling at its best, so that's what we want to bring into our shows. And look, we appreciate that there's a learning curve for everyone, and I'm more than happy to work with people with that learning curve, which is what you've seen time and time again throughout the years, right? But we need to. But what I'm saying is to stand out. So especially if you've not come through our training school, especially if you don't have that recommendation from one of our wrestlers, etc., right? If you really want to stand out, you need to make sure you've ticked all those boxes and you understand, right? Because again, just very little things, like I say, like for example, that when you know when to take it home, or when you know when you've got them here and we don't bring it back down, right? And you instead you're able to take it to the next level. Those are the things that will make your match stand out on a card. Those are the things that will make your match get a huge reaction on a card. Those are the things that I'll notice, right? And that's what I'm saying. If you want to give yourself the best chance of succeeding, you want to get over, because again, look, I'm a sucker for a good music video, obviously, right? But the music video, that opens the door, right? But you need to get over the moves and start focusing on everything else that surrounds it, right? Or you will get found out very quickly, right? Yeah. And again, like I say, we don't need to. You don't need to be a finished article, because if you waited for a finished article, RevPro wouldn't have even opened its doors, right? Because we're still not a finished article, right? We're still learning on a day-to-day basis and improving and evolving. So you don't need to be a finished article, but you need to have an understanding of those moments, right? Because I think for a lot of people, those moments which aren't really taught in wrestling schools, and there's a lot of bad habits which are developed because we look at the industry leader who is like, you know, you watch WWE and you're like, and the focus is always lead with the left, go for a pin. Whenever you've got an opportunity to go for a pin, right? And it goes against, obviously, so a lot of the stuff I'll tell you, I'd be like, you didn't need to go for a pin at that specific point, right? Because what does a pin do? 1, 2, oh, back down. Yeah. Right? So instead of going for the pin, what can you do to get it to the next? So you can still make it look like you're winning a professional wrestling contest. You want to win a professional wrestling contest, but realistically, like if you're playing football, right, you're not going to shoot for goal when you don't have a realistic opportunity of getting the ball in the back of the net, right? Yeah. So I try to look at stuff from a different perspective, but I'm also very aware that I'm looking at stuff from essentially a house show perspective, because our mentality is the live audience. You listen to that live crowd. I know sometimes people like to look at stuff for TV, and I know that often on TV they like those lows because you get that low. You can be like, coming up next week is blah, 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 or coming up later is blah, blah, blah. But my mentality is always about the most exciting show before us possible. And I think that's one of the luxuries we're afforded as independent wrestling. And that's one of the few things that can help make us stand out to TV wrestling. So these are the things. And again, to have that understanding of, you will be asked different things when you go to a WWE. You will be asked different things, and then if you go to an AEW, if you go to a RevPro, notice how I just clubbed myself in with those two.
You have to. Well, you have to.
But yeah, so that's kind of my mentality, and that's what I would say. And look, I could write a book on the things I look for in professional wrestling.
I was just about to say to you, I think you should, or even if you do some sort of seminar where you maybe talk to, you know, up and coming people that have been in the business 2-3 years, because I thought this is like, even me as someone that's training, I'm hearing stuff and I'm just like, oh, this is stuff that I definitely want to employ into my training, and when I'm putting matches together and you know, thinking about me and my friends have this discussion all the time, even when it comes to when we're reviewing like WWE and AEW and things of that nature. You know, for us, I enjoy wrestling when the wrestling is tailored to the crowd at the arena or wherever the venue is, as opposed to them just doing stuff for the people at home. Because again, we're not seeing it live. We're not getting that full on reception. Like, we're getting everything that we're meant to get just off the bare proxy of it being on TV. But yeah, and I also people in the venue.
Yeah, and I also had this theory though as well, that basically people have been doing it for so long, in terms of like, you know, WWE now is like just a copy and paste process, right? There's so many teams of writers. It was much better when there was a handful of writers, right? Yeah. Teams of people. Why do you do it that way? Because that's the way we do it, right? That's the way WWE does it, right? And I'm just of the belief that you've been doing it for so long now. Why don't you try something different, right? Yeah. Who's to say it wouldn't work if you tried something a little bit different against the grain, so the product stops becoming as sanitary as it's become, you know, and starts to become more exciting. But yeah, look, this side of wrestling I love talking about. I really do. And I like some of my most fun times in wrestling is at the training school doing stuff like this. I don't do it anywhere near as much as I used to do. But anytime I get to go down to a training school, like I love it. I genuinely do. And yeah, like it's certainly something that I'll kind of look to kind of do more of in the future in terms of, you know, and again, I'm not sitting here because I feel so, it's almost like I've got imposter syndrome, right? I'm not sitting here saying this is how you do it. I'm just like, this is the way that I like to do it. This is the way that I like to see it. This is what I like to put on my shows. These are my philosophies. These are my principles. These are some of the things that I've told other people. These are some of the things I've picked up on by being around some of the best wrestlers in the world, and seeing more what matches live than I probably have any right to have done, or, you know, just to the point of, you know, I'm so, I don't know, like, I've just watched so much wrestling. But again, these are all the things, and watch wrestling. My last point is watch wrestling and look for patterns, right? You may not even notice, right? The thing is, you watch, like, think about your favorite wrestlers. Everyone's got different favorite wrestlers, beauty of professional wrestling, right? But watch your favorite wrestlers. And when you watch your favorite wrestlers, then start to develop, notice patterns. Why does the crowd come up at a certain way at particular points, right? Why does the crowd react at certain points? You know, and you can look at, again, I always say you can watch one wrestling match 100 times for 100 different things. But if you watch multiple matches, just notice patterns, right? So notice when the crowd are at their hottest every single match of that particular wrestler. And then think about it. Oh, are they doing something the same in the lead up to that moment? Then that starts to give you the answers, right? And that stuff is often stuff that those wrestlers themselves maybe do instinctively, right? And those instincts may come from years and years and years of professional wrestling. They may not be able to verbalize it. I always say, just because you're the best wrestler, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the best teacher, right? Yeah. And just because you can, so people, they might not be able to verbalize why they do something. I just do it, you know, through experience. I just do it, right? So if you can work out what they're doing, look at the patterns and create a theory out behind those patterns, test it out yourself, 9 times out of 10, you'll be like, oh, that works. Now I can start to implement that myself. Yeah. Instinct can come for everyone, or, you know, because we've all got different attributes, we might have different instincts for different things, right? So some people might be great at cutting promos. Some people might be great at move placement. Some people might be great at putting finishes together. You know, everyone's got different things that they excel at, right? So it's not going to come naturally for every single person. But if you can start thinking about it in a different way, then all of a sudden you can then you can then add logic behind what you're doing. So it's not so it becomes a method to the madness, so to speak. And you might have to overthink it to begin with, but you overthink it enough, and all of a sudden it'll become common nature. No different to when you first learn how to bump. Think about all the different things that are going through your mind when you first learn how to bump. And now, once you've been doing it a few weeks, a few months, a few years, think how natural it is to bump. You can bump on command. No issue whatsoever. No overthinking. Every single aspect of professional wrestling is like that. Every single aspect of life is like that. When you learn something, there's a learning curve where you're having to think about it. And then once you've overthought about it and you've thought about it and you've analyzed it, you've made your mistakes, you've worked out where the mistakes are, you correct those mistakes, you make adjustments, it eventually becomes, you know, second nature to you. And that is what you're aiming to achieve in everything with professional wrestling.
Nice, excellent. Final question for you, Andy. Honestly, this has been an excellent interview, man. If you could go back 14 years ago to speak to Andy when he first started RevPro, what would you tell him where this company is on the August 29th? What would you say to him?
What? So where, if I were to go back and say, this is where we're going to be.
This is where you're going to be in August 29th. What would you tell him?
Basically, probably just keep the faith, because you're gonna you're gonna have a lot of highs, right? And never become complacent. Never take those highs for granted. You're also going to have a lot of lows, right? But the moments you create along the way are stuff that you should absolutely cherish. Probably make more of those moments as well. Probably, I always say, like, we're always so busy looking at what's in front of us that sometimes we fail to look at what's beside us, right, in the here and now. Obviously, you often dwell on the past and you look towards the future, but very, very rarely do you actually get to appreciate the present, the now. I think as I'm getting older, I'm getting better at doing that. But I look at the moments we've had over our 14-year history, and I think there's so many times where I would have loved to have been able to appreciate more exactly what we've done. I would have loved to have taken more photos. I would have loved to have, you know, not got us wound up by a single person's opinion. I'd have loved to have a bigger picture. I would like mindset. You know, I'd love to have known that when times are hard, we will get through this, because uncertainty is some of the hardest things you have to deal with. And I would use Wembley to illustrate that point, to say, you know, look, this is where you're going to get to, and you're still not going to be satisfied, because you're still going to want to be aiming for something bigger, something better, but you're on the right path, right? And I think that if 14 years ago I knew that I'd be running Wembley now, it would have blown my mind. But because you're living the journey on a day-to-day basis, you don't see that, right? And it's like that same thing of like, you know, look, it's like think about, so I've got like an 8-year-old child, right? And he's growing, like, but it's like all of a sudden a baby becomes like just this grown child, like just boom, boom, and you don't even notice it, right? Because you see it gradually, but you look back at those pictures and you're like, wow, you know, like this is insanity, right? And I think that that's just being able to be reflective of that and look to the side. I think that's so important, and that's definitely what I would have told myself, whilst at the same time saying, you know, look, this is what you're going to achieve, and this will blow your mind. You know, and if I tell you this now, promise you don't tell yourself that. You know, promise you don't let that affect your decisions. But like, use it to know that this is going to be worth it. You are going to achieve something, right? So this is it. This is what I'd tell myself. And I would be, I don't know. I think that's it. I think, you know, just look to the side of you. Appreciate where you are, take as many pictures as possible, and treasure these moments as much as possible, and reminisce about these moments as much as possible as well, because it's always when stuff goes, like, I don't want to say when stuff goes wrong, but you know, look, we've lost a lot of good brothers over the years, and it's when we lose them that we reminisce about the times that we've had together and everything. But like, let's reminisce about those times now, because we're creating these moments, these times on just a day-to-day basis. So that's what I would live in the now. I think that's probably the concise way of saying it. Live in the now and have no fear.
Perfect. Andy, this has been an absolute pleasure. Honestly, this has been a great interview, man. Thank you for spending your time. I know we initially said 45 minutes, but with everything that we spoke about, I feel like the 2 hours was absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it. Where can people find tickets for the RevPro event this weekend?
That's what we're here for. Look, revolutionprowrestling.com. There's 2 places to get tickets. There's Access and Ticket Tailor. So if you go on revolutionprowrestling.com, there's different allocations on each. So you can just, if you go on, there's like something that says click here to buy your tickets. So you can just choose. So I think the main link goes to the Access page, but if you want the Ticket Tailor page, you can put events.revolutionprowrestling.com. It'll take you straight to the Access page. The Ticket Tailor page. There's different, like I say, different allocations. So you might find out if one allocation doesn't have a seat you want, the other allocation does. That is the main source of buying tickets. Of course, if you can't be there live, there's My AEW, where it's available as a standalone pay-per-view. I think it's $9.99. It's going to cost us a standalone pay-per-view. Or you can get it on RevPro on demand, which, again, with that, it's a subscription service, but there's no commitments, but you've got access to every single one of our shows, our archive. You'll get to watch the show live, and you get, obviously, for 1 month subscription, you've got the 4 months access, and over the course of the next month. So if you subscribe now, for example, you'll get our show. You'll obviously have full access to the archive catalogue, but you'll also get, obviously, Wembley. You're going to get Live in London 111, I believe. You're going to get our live in Coventry event, and you'll get Raw Deal coming live from Stevenage. So that's 4 shows in your, in the 4 weeks following your first month subscription. If you subscribe the day before, again, this is if you want to go back and look through the archive. If you subscribe the day before, you time it the day before, you'll also get to see our 2 shows that we are running in Paris at the end of September. So like I say, it's a great opportunity to kind of get invested. So please check us out. Please give us the opportunity. We take no one's investment for granted, and every single penny that goes in, I have to stress, every single penny that goes in to Revolution Pro Wrestling goes out to support Revolution Pro Wrestling. We're growing this thing 1 fan at a time. We are as DIY as it comes when it comes to professional wrestling organizations. You can even look at some of the smaller you can look at, there's people who are perceived to be smaller than us in the UK, but they've got teams of people working behind them, right? This is so shoestring, you wouldn't believe. If you understood how little bodies were behind this and every aspect of it, right, it would blow your mind what we're able to achieve. So if we can take this to the next level, imagine what we can achieve then. Because again, that's our mindset, that's our goal. So please, if you can, support us, get the tickets. If you can't be there live, we hope you can be there live, because we want to break our attendance record. We really do. But if you can't be there live, then just on demand, my AEW, 2 great ways to watch the event. And then obviously throughout the year, please continue to support us, because we don't just come out to play in August. We're operating each and every week up and down the country. Big shows coming up. For example, October, Fantastic Mania UK. The stars of CMLL are coming to Wolverhampton for 2 huge shows this coming October. I think it's the 17th, potentially the 16th. I don't know, whatever the Saturday is of that weekend. But that's coming up. That's round the corner, sooner than you might think. And so many great things planned and coming, and your support is what enables us to continue to do this. So thank you very much. If you lasted this long, thank you so much for listening. Yeah, I hope we see you at Wembley.
Hopefully so. I literally just got a text from my friend in my group chat. He did ask, he said, quickly ask this: when will you allow me to come and perform Gabe's song when you next book him?
Whenever you want.
Whenever you want. Just let me know. I'll be there.
I love it.
I'll be there. 2 years in the dojo.
I love it.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you grab tickets for this weekend show. Andy, again, thank you very much. This has been Indie Takers. I've been Del, Andy Quildan. We'll see you guys soon.